thank you to Jim and the BWA members for bringing me here today. I know a couple of months ago when we got to talk at the DNR Roundtable, I got to spend a lot of time with Jim and his group and just talk about some of their goals and some of the things they would like to see. And at that point, he asked if I would come back and talk during this. And I said, absolutely. I'd love to come back. It's a great group. And the nice thing, it's certainly people who are passionate about deer hunting and passionate about wildlife. And I'll start by saying I'm very blessed to be a wildlife biologist. I've got to work with deer for the last nearly 20 years. But I will tell all of you in here that, yes, even though I am a wildlife biologist, I am first and foremost a deer hunter. And I'm very proud of that, and I love to talk with other deer hunters. And I think that's important because not only from the science end of it, it doesn't do us any good if we understand everything from that end if we can't relate to the hunters, the sportsmen and women who are out there that are really making programs either succeed or fail based on what we choose to harvest when we're hunting. So from the QDMA standpoint, or the organization I work for, we're an educational organization. We are not here to enforce or to push policy down any individual state's throats or any individual group's throats. We're really coming from an educational standpoint just to help provide good information to sportsmen and women so that they can make good decisions when they're out there hunting. Work cooperatively with state agencies to help them improve programs or to help them share information and get information out to members. So it's really a really good working relationship that we have here in Minnesota and in the vast majority of states across the country. So what I have here today, my presentation, you can see is the state of the whitetail, trends in harvest and population dynamics. Moretta's done a nice job explaining what has happened in Pennsylvania and what has happened in some of the places here in Minnesota. I'm going to take a big picture look at this, and I'm fortunate and I get to work with many different states across the country. So I'm going to show you from a national perspective what has really happened over the last decade with respect to deer hunting and some of these yearling buck harvest trends, some of these antlerless harvest trends, because what we see today, not only here in Minnesota, but across the U.S., is vastly different from what we had a decade ago. And anybody that's interested in deer clearly knows that interest in quality deer management has increased dramatically during the past decade, and in many states now have implemented regulations to improve either the herd or the deer herd's health, improve habitat quality, and just as importantly, improve hunter satisfaction and hunter perceptions of what's going on within their state. And in many cases, this comes down to buck harvest regulations, some voluntary, some mandatory, and increased antlerless opportunities in many places to balance deer herds with these habitats. Well, from our end, we have the opportunity to work in many different states. So what we did back in 1999, we created did a survey, a national survey, every deer project leader in the country. We asked them a series of questions on deer densities within their state, harvest statistics, percentage of yearling bucks harvested, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, numbers of antlerless deer harvested, and we were able to compile this for the entire country. And we produced this map, which provided some really interesting data. When we updated this a few years later, asked all the deer biologists same questions again, see what they had, and it provided for some real meaningful comparisons between these years. Now, every state didn't respond to our survey, but the vast majority of them did. And what we received from them provided some really good information that was apples-to-apples comparisons amongst states in between these 2 years. And we noticed that there were some dramatic differences between the surveys. The first was with whitetail densities. There were somewhere around 30 million deer at the time we did the first survey, and about 30 million at the time of the second survey. So the overall number did not change, but the distribution of those deer changed dramatically. There was big decreases in many of the eastern states with respect to deer densities, and much of this was intentional. Places like Pennsylvania, Virginia, Georgia, where the goal was to really knock these deer herds back and help balance them with habitats. There were corresponding increases in many of the western states, the fringe, what we talk about, of the frontier of whitetail habitat. If we can look specifically in Minnesota and see that much of the state was about the same, what was not the same tended to be a little bit higher from a deer density perspective. The green on here is the lowest, and as you get into yellow and orange and red, it gets higher. So you can see pretty close between these two, but there were definitely a few more deer, as reported by the DNR during the second. Well, with respect to antlerless harvest, this is obviously what's driving these deer densities. This picture here, this was a long time to change. The paradigm was obviously we were out to hunt bucks, which was great back in the early 1900s when deer herds were far below what most habitats could support. It's provided opportunities for everybody to hunt, maximum recreational effort, everybody could go and shoot a buck. But by protecting those, we allowed deer herds to grow, and that worked very well. And I'll talk a little more about this afternoon in my other talk. But this type of scenario works great when deer herds are far below what habitats can support, because we don't lose, or the great habitats, we're not losing any of that herd or habitat health based on too many deer. So it's amazing to think that as long as we have deer hunted in the U.S., it wasn't until 1999 that we finally killed more antlerless deer than we did antlered bucks. So you think of how long or how storied of deer hunting traditions we had. 1999 was a landmark year for deer management. We finally passed that barrier. And we can take a look at now, about 2/3 of the states now harvest more antlerless deer than they do antlered bucks, which we see here in red. And about 1/3 of them are still shooting more antlered bucks than does. Now, if you take a look at in northern New England, and I'm very familiar particularly with New Hampshire, before I came to QDMA, I was the state of New Hampshire's deer and bear biologist. And it's an entirely different world in that part of the country. You know, those states can have very successful deer management programs, even though they shoot a much smaller percentage of antlerless deer. You know, there's the northern fringe of whitetail habitat, very low productivity in most of those soils. You know, they just don't have that many fawns hitting the ground each year or that many that survive. So they don't need to shoot nearly as high a percentage. But you can look at the vast majority of the country and you just simply cannot have successful deer management programs with that model. Particularly places like Michigan that have very good with sportsmen and women that try to get them to harvest more antlerless deer. So you're very fortunate here in your state that you do, that you're colored in red here and you're harvesting more antlerless deer than antlered bucks. Because the big thing in this whole thing is to make sure that you can balance those deer herds with habitat before anything else. If you can't do that, nothing else matters from a buck perspective or a hunting opportunity. Because at some point, as you saw the pictures of Rochester, Pennsylvania, everything is going to crash. And obviously you don't want that to happen from a natural resource standpoint or from a hunting standpoint. Well, if we look specifically at antlerless deer harvest in this part of the country, during those 2 survey periods, they've increased their average antlerless harvest by 78%. If you take a look, this is obviously the most productive region that we have in the U.S., so it's nice to see these states are getting out ahead of this curve and say, you know, we want to make sure that we don't have the problems that Brett talked about in Pennsylvania, or basically the entire eastern seaboard had. You know, you certainly don't want those to happen in Minnesota, and I'm confident with what they have here from a DNR management program that you're not going to get there. But so when it's Brett or whoever is asking sportsmen here in Minnesota to harvest additional antlerless deer and help do this, know that, you know, that is the most important thing that you can do from a deer management standpoint to ensure that you have healthy deer populations far into the future. And with this, Illinois and Iowa actually lead the charge here, and congrats to Dale and then to Willie with us. You know, this is a hard thing coming. You know, this is a very difficult thing to do, and to be able to stay ahead of this curve is very important. All right, well, if we take a big picture look at the entire country, and I'll talk about much of this one just to see how you're, let you know how you fit in amongst your neighbors. Wisconsin, in our last survey, led the nation with harvesting about 274,000 antlerless deer, which we all know the issues that Wisconsin deals with. Alabama was second, Pennsylvania was right there, and Minnesota was about 149,000. The important part of this is not comparing the numbers of antlerless deer shot here to these other states, because you can't do that. You know, you certainly don't have the same habitat that Wisconsin has, or the same hunter numbers, or the same tradition. So my point is not to just say, well, they shot more than you. My point is to say, to teach you to understand that it's not always a one-to-one comparison. But the most important part of this is that, yes, you guys are harvesting above that 50% antlerless deer, which is very good for your state. It's something that as sportsmen and women here, you should be very proud of in Minnesota.